What's up, guys? This is Chris from Warrior Soul Fitness. I got a question yesterday from a gentleman named John asking me about carb cycling. For those of you who don't know what carb cycling is, basically you go through a period of 3 or 4 days when you're eating lower carbohydrates, and then on the fourth day or the fifth day, you're eating an abundance of carbohydrates. So the lower carbs might be 50 grams, the higher carbs might be 300, 400 grams of carbohydrates. The idea here, the idea behind this diet is that you're clearing out space in your muscle cells and in your liver cells, which store glycogen, for insulin to transport more nutrients into those cells. So basically, if the storage space in your muscles and in your liver are full, insulin has nowhere to bring those nutrients except for your fat mass. So if you continue to eat carbohydrates after that storage space is full, all you're doing is feeding your fat mass, right? Because insulin can't bring it into those cells, it can't push it, it can't slam it in there because the storage space is full. So what you get here is you get yourself into a caloric deficit for those 3 days where you're depriving your body of calories, you are starving the fat mass, you're still eating all the macronutrients necessary to maintain your muscle mass, your protein is there, your good fats are there, and you have a small amount of carbohydrates, but you're depriving your fat mass. And then on the fourth day, you take an abundance of carbohydrates in, and because you've cleared all that space out, you're feeding your muscle cells and not your fat cells, right? I know that's repetitive, but I wanted to make that clear. John's question is, knowing that I have to be in a caloric deficit in order to burn fat, in order to burn a certain amount of fat each week, how do I stay in that caloric deficit and still have a high carb day? And here's the answer. The issue is you can't look at a caloric deficit in terms of a period of a day. You have to look at it in terms of a period of a week. So because you're going through those lower carb periods before the high carb day and then the lower carb period after the high carb day, you are able to eat an abundance of carbohydrates on your high carb day because you'll still be in a caloric deficit for the week, right? So let's say this, it takes 3,500 calories. 3,500 calories are in 1 pound of fat. So you need to be in a caloric deficit of 3,500 calories over a period of week to burn 1 pound of fat per week. Now, your first 3 days, that caloric deficit adds up, right? So say you're burning 500 calories a day, 1,500 calories the 3 days before, 1,500 calories the 3 days after. And then on the high carb day, let's say you're in a 200 calories caloric surplus, right? Basically, what will happen is you'll still be under your caloric deficit because of the 3 days before and the 3 days after. The middle day might put a dent into that deficit, but it's not going to eliminate that caloric deficit because we're talking in a period of a week. Now, while you might put a dent into that deficit, there are some benefits here from carb cycling and having that higher carb day, and some conditions that you should use carb cycling in and some conditions that you shouldn't use carb cycling in. And I'm going to go over those. So first, the benefits of carb cycling are this. On your low carb days, basically what's happening within you is you're starving that fat mass, like I said, but in addition to that, there's these hormonal processes. You're secreting less insulin on those days. Yes, you're still secreting insulin because you have you're eating protein, and eating protein is insulinogenic, and insulin is still required to transport protein to the muscle cells. But you're secreting less insulin because you're eating less calories. So because insulin and growth hormone, which is a hormone that helps you to burn fat and build muscle, are antagonistic, having less insulin in your system is going to lead to having more growth hormone in your system. So you'll be secreting more growth hormone on those days, which will help you in metabolizing fat and maintaining and building muscle mass. Then on the fourth day, what happens a lot of times when we're on severely low carb diets over a long period of time, we secrete a stress hormone called cortisol. Cortisol, unlike growth hormone, is something that causes us to maintain fat and doesn't like to help us build muscle mass because it's a survival hormone. It helps us to retain energy, and muscle mass is an energy burning tissue. So what happens when we're under stress, we secrete cortisol because it puts us into what they call survival mode. Essentially, it keeps all anabolic processes. It could shut down all anabolic processes. Now, that's a very severe case, and that likely won't happen. But having insulin on those days, because insulin and cortisol are antagonistic with each other, basically you're regulating your cortisol, and the overabundance of insulin on those days is going to regulate that cortisol and keep you from getting the negative effects of the stress hormone. And in addition to that, on those high carb days, you're slamming more glycogen into your muscle cells, causing them to fill out, and giving your muscles more energy for the 3 days afterwards. So you're going to be able to train heavier, you're going to be able to use heavier weights, have more energy in the gym, and get more benefit out of your workouts. John also asked me if he should adjust his calories on his adjust his macronutrients on his lower carbohydrate days to include things like fats and more protein. And yes, I think that there is benefit to eating a little bit more fat and more protein. Now, particularly a little bit more fat. And the reason is that fat actually helps to regulate insulin. So having a little bit more fat on those lower carbohydrate days is actually going to regulate your insulin secretion from eating that protein. And so you'll get more benefit out of the overall cycle. Now, conditions under which you should and shouldn't carb cycle. So here's the deal. Carb cycling is perfect for you if you're on the leaner side already. So say you're under 12%, under 15% body fat, and your metabolism is still working. You still have some degree of insulin sensitivity, right? On the other hand, if you're over 20% body fat, I really wouldn't go to carb cycling until you're a little bit lower in your body fat percentage. And the reason is this, because if you are nearing obesity or are obese, you are already less insulin sensitive. So having those higher carbs on that one particular day is not necessarily going to benefit you in becoming more insulin sensitive. So you need to kind of build up that insulin sensitivity over time in order to make this a viable and effective method for you. Sorry, this is a long video. I know that this is also a much more complicated scientific process that I'm talking about, but if you guys have any questions for me, you can always hit me up at gettingshredded@gmail.com. And enjoy my hair, enjoy my beard, and enjoy my new kitchen. Peace.